Hey there, this is episode 106 of The First 10 Minutes. I'm Tony Parmenter.
I'm Steve Halliwell.
And I'm Aaron Williams.
And this is a video games podcast where we play the first 10 minutes of a video game. Then we sit down here to discuss how well that game communicates itself to the player, both in terms of what the game is about and how to play the game. And in response to our latest listener poll, which you can find at The First 10 Minutes on Twitter, you, the listeners, voted for us to play Far Lone Sails. I played Far Lone Sails, so take it away, me. Let's, damn, I should have thought ahead.
I have Wikipedia up.
Oh, go for it.
Far Lone Sails is an exploration adventure game developed by Okomotive. The game released on Microsoft Windows and OS X on 17th May 2018 with Xbox One and PlayStation 4 versions in development. In Far, the player controls the driver of a large vehicle and explores a massive dried ocean bed in a post-apocalypse world searching for an old civilization. The game is played from a side-scrolling perspective with the vehicle interior seen as a cross-section. This just keeps going, so let's stop.
That all checks out and sounds very factual.
Yeah.
But according to Steam,
let's go.
This game says, traverse a dried-out seabed littered with the remains of a decaying civilization, keep your unique vessel going, overcome numerous obstacles, and withstand the hazardous weather conditions. How far can you make it? What will you find? If you're looking for some Steam tags, I've got a whole bunch of them here for you. This is adventure, indie, atmospheric, great soundtrack, puzzle, exploration, post-apocalyptic, single-player action, driving, puzzle platformer, design and illustration, 2.5D story-rich, short survival, platformer, casual, action, adventure, family-friendly video game. So what is interesting to me about all of this is that there is a lot more sort of prescriptive information in those descriptions than the game overtly tells you, at least in the first 10 minutes. The game is mostly evocative and mostly about tone in these early stages, as well as some very stripped down and very effective tutorialization. So I don't want to go through absolutely every little thing that I end up doing in this game, but it does start on a sea of clouds and we slowly pull down to reveal a fairly flat landscape. The majority of the color palettes here are grayscale, and there's a little red hooded figure. If we're going to draw a point of similarity, I would say kind of similar in terms of the robes to, say, something out of Journey. But this character is a lot squatter, seems very small against this background. A breeze begins to blow, and the tree that I'm under, which is leaning very, very hard to the right, the direction that I'm going to be traveling, a single leaf flies off and disappears in the wind. And then I get a very simple series of instructions as I begin to hold the left analog stick as it instructs me to do. And I run rightwards using the left analog stick. It's all locked to a plane, similar to, say, something like Inside. I run past a red letterbox which falls off a pole. The game then tells me that I can use the B button to pick it up, and I continue carrying it with me, going to a building. We get a cross-section of the building. I learn that I can jump using the A button, and I come across my first big red button. That's actually
never push it.
That's yes.
That's the Tommy Lee Jones instruction.
That's actually in the world space in the middle of this first building that I run through. This building's a little bit like a traversal sort of puzzle box. It teaches me some of the simple elements that I have to pay attention to for traversal. The first of which is when I see a red button, I push it. Pretty much no matter where it is, a red button is something that I should push.
Push how?
It's also another skill check here in this particular case because I have to jump to hit it. Okay. So I had to jump to get into the building. I have to jump to push it again. And when I do, get a nice juicy sound effect. Some lights and illumination comes on inside the building. And then I have to go up and down a series of stairs and sort of work my way around things, trying to figure out how to maneuver through this space. It's quite straightforward. It's climbing upstairs in the right places. It's jumping across the correct gaps and heading through the right parts of the building. When I get up to the attic, it tells me that I can zoom in and out using the triggers on my controller, so that I can get a wider view or a tighter view. There were a number of different sort of maneuverable or pick-upable objects. I faffed around with them a bit to see what I could or couldn't pick up, and then I continued on my merry way with the red letterbox.
Very quickly, was there anything thematically happening in that area that was significant?
In terms of from a storytelling perspective, you mean?
Yeah, totally. Because I mean, like you made a comparison to Inside earlier, which I know
Yeah,
is yeah, that's a game that sort of relies a lot on unsaid environmental detail to sort of flesh out what's occurring,
right.
character motivations and the like. I was just wondering if there was anything happening here of a similar nature.
Well, the main thing that stood out to me when I played through it was that there's a large sort of poster or diagram or illustration on the back wall of the building
Yeah.
that turns out to be the vehicle that I'm heading towards, that I'm going to assume control of and start traveling in. At the time, I kind of half recognized it because I'd seen it in the marketing material. But it looks like a place that somebody who built this thing had lived, presumably while they were constructing it. And the little attic area had the feeling that it was somewhere that that somebody lived.
It was interesting to me when I was reviewing footage, knowing little to none of this game before it was in the poll. Seeing those blueprints, I actually thought that it was kind of looked like the design for the house itself. So it was a big surprise later on finding out that there was actually another construct that had been made that was of a similar shape.
Right. And that does remind me, dear listeners, that you should head over to our YouTube channel. You can actually look at the 10 minutes of my playthrough if you would like to play along at home or on the bus or the train or wherever you happen to be when you're listening to this. So traveling left to right, as per usual. And it's quite a long way that I have to continue walking holding this letterbox. I come to what is quite clearly a shoreline and a dry seabed with a few sort of puddles and overturned rowboats. There's a nice little moment of going past sort of the fence line on the dunes. There's a seagull in the foreground that cries loudly, even though there doesn't appear to be any sea for the seagull to gull in. The main thing that I'm getting a sense of here as I move is just how vast the landscape is and how small I am in it. And it does seem to take advantage of this early stage of the game as an opportunity to reinforce that I'm quite tiny. I feel childlike. I have a very short stride, so I'm sort of pottering along and scurrying quickly as I'm moving through these sort of misty areas and along what looks like a collapsed wharf. It looked like there was some colourful drawings on a rock in the foreground, so I sort of zoomed in and out a little bit to try and get a sense of what it might be or who might have put it there. But before very long, I come to what's clearly a vehicle of some kind. Simply by walking right, I end up going inside it. We get a cross-section of this vehicle, and I can already see a number of contraptions, a whole bunch of buttons, and labels of things in English, telling me things like steam, energy, speed, and also an odometer. In addition to a little bunk bed,
A gigantic
hooks on the
odometer.
ceiling, and yeah,
In
there's
comparison to
all kinds of bits and pieces on the inside of this vehicle. So clearly, this was where I'm supposed to go and what I'm supposed to do. But it's not entirely clear to me when I walk inside it as to exactly what I should do first, because there are an awful lot of buttons. The first one that I come across is above me, much like the one in the building was. So I stand under, I jump. It turns out I'm on a little elevator that takes me up to the top of the vehicle, and now I can walk around on the top of the exterior. This is a super useful thing to know, so I don't think it's a coincidence that I ended up doing it first. An awareness of how I can get into and out of this vehicle. There's the elevator exit on the top. There's the one at the rear that I just walked through, and it turns out as well there is another one in the bottom at the front. So I understand that I can be on top of the vehicle. I understand that I can be inside the vehicle. I still don't have a clear idea of what it is that I'm supposed to do. So I sort of end up just moving around from bit to bit and pushing different buttons to see what happens. One of the biggest ones in the most illuminated area, when I push it, it actually doesn't allow me to depress it all the way, pushes back on me a little bit. And underneath the energy section of the vehicle, a light sort of flashes on and off, and I get a little bit of a fizzing sound.
Right, so that's indicating something like the energy is empty.
Energy's empty, and I can't push that giant button. So I've already got a plan in my mind that that's the go button, but I need to figure out what else that I have to do inside this vessel to make it go. There's a brightly illuminated up arrow at the aft I've been playing too much Sea of Thieves, at the back of the vehicle.
On the left of the screen.
Yeah.
On the left of the screen. And there are a couple of crates sitting on it and a big red button next to it as well. So I push that button. These boxes get sort of pushed up in the direction that the arrow goes, and then I get a very juicy, very well reinforced series of visual and audio cues where I see sort of a blue fluid flowing along pipes at the back of the vessel, filling up the energy meter. And now I've learned this is where you put the fuel. This is how you put the fuel in the engine. Engine needs go juice to go. So now that that's all done, I put another box in the section where I can fuel things up because the first attempt that I did filled up the energy to exactly halfway. So I wanted to check and see whether one crate equals half the tank.
Or if it's
that's
a
certainly
random output.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It certainly appears to be the case that that one of these little white wooden crates equals half of the energy meter. I also noticed that there are some things hanging from hooks on the ceiling, so I muck around a little bit seeing if I can hang other objects on there, and I can. So the red letterbox is now hanging from a hook. I go and push the big button. It now allows me to depress it all the way. It takes quite some time to do this before it then actually snap locks in place, and then the entire vehicle starts trundling along slowly, again, heading towards the right of screen. So now that we're underway and I've clearly succeeded forever, I just start running around the inside of the vessel, trying to push things, trying to grab things. It's like a fire hosey thing there. And then before long, the steam meter starts glowing red, clearly telling me bad stuff. So I go and push the steam button and it releases a bunch of steam pressure. I see that the giant button also unclicks itself and starts to push back out, and the vehicle starts slowing down. So in pretty short order, I'm realizing that all of these different buttons are all on sort of separate cadence, separate cooldowns. I'm going to have to move around the inside of the vessel, keeping all of them in the state that I want them to be in, depressed, not depressed, fueled up properly. So at this point, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed because I'm looking around trying to figure out what should I prioritize, when should I prioritize it. It doesn't feel like I'm getting punished severely for not doing it well, but it does take me a little while to start to get into the rhythm of what I should pay attention to when and how long I can expect things to take before I need to pay attention to them again.
Yeah. It also seems like though that there's a good amount of time when sort of a crisis moment occurs for you to catch it.
Yeah. And one of the buttons I find, which is a smaller and in a much more out of the way place, turns out to be the emergency brake. So when I hit it, it switches the engine off. It drops a little hook out the bottom of the vehicle, and it all slows down quite quickly.
It's very Fury Road.
Pretty soon thereafter, as we're heading across this dry ocean bed with all of the sort of wooden detritus and ruins just sort of lying around, I see some more crates lying on the ground. So I run to the front of the vehicle. I run out the front door. I grab one of the crates. I let the vehicle drive over the top of me. Doesn't run me over, but I can quite easily pass underneath it.
Right. So that's probably worth clarifying, is that this vehicle's moving independent of your control in a way.
Yes, as long as the right buttons are still depressed and in action, the vehicle will keep going.
Yeah.
But because that main engine button does eventually pop back out again, the vehicle will eventually stop.
Yeah.
So even if I fall off the back of it, it's eventually going to stop, and I'll be able to catch up with it again.
Yeah.
So I managed to grab 4 crates out of here. The vehicle sort of stops because I haven't been on board to maintain it and keep all of the things whizzing and whirring. But again, I'm underway in fairly short order. It's also worth noting there's some very lovely music in this game. There's juicy sound effects that are giving me feedback for the things that I'm doing on the vessel, but the "You Are Traveling" music that kicks in as the vehicle starts moving, and that fades out when it stops moving and then reappears again when you're underway. It's got a very purposeful sound to it, and it made me feel like I was not only doing the right thing, but that I was doing something that was important and fulfilling.
Well, I think that's
for this character.
And that was something that I kind of observed in the animations of the character as well, because like the walk cycle that the character has when it's first initiated, like I mean the game begins at a sort of what appears to be a gravesite, or something, a memorial area of sorts for presumably someone who also helped create this ship.
It's a very mournful looking tree that you start under.
Totally.
As well.
It's a dead tree, one leaf left. It's bent to the right. It's bent out towards the sea and everything.
It looks like it's reaching towards something rather than leaning away from something.
Exactly. And so as soon as your avatar starts to move, there's just this immediate sense of purpose inside of how they're rolling. And I think as well there's the fact that their face is shrouded by a hood kind of indicates that like, well, it's largely up to you what their facial expression is, and their facial expression doesn't really matter because they have a job to do. However they're processing this, they're doing that alongside doing the work.
Yep.
I thought that was really interesting.
Yep. And they are clearly heading towards this vehicle.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that they're doing intentionally. This feels like something that has been much planned for. And much prepared.
And I love that the post box is one of the things that you have to, well, not necessarily you have to, but that you can destroy for fuel, because like that right there is like that's an indicator that you have been trained in some way to be ready to sacrifice for purpose.
Yep.
Because like you're literally destroying mementos, like you're literally destroying the memories of your former life. And
that is backed up by the fact that there is a sweet chivo for getting all the way to the end with that letterbox.
Just like the garden gnome, all fucking over again.
The other thing, actually, while I think of it, is that this vehicle feels rigged together. It feels like it's been assembled out of whatever happened to come to hand. It feels competently assembled, but it does feel a bit bespoke. You might say a little bit artisanal.
A little bit Fury Roadie.
Just a tad. Something that just occurred to me, Aaron, from what you were saying about the beginning of the game feeling like a memorial, is that that would perhaps explain a little bit about why I'm having to run around the inside of this vehicle never quite feeling like I'm fully on top of things, because it was possibly designed to be operated by more than one person.
That would make complete sense. I mean,
but I'm the only one left.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like experiences watching. I remember there's been one or two times where you and I have been playing Sea of Thieves together, and you've been sort of taking care of a sloop while I've been fucking around and kind of sitting back and watching. And it is sort of like watching you make a mad dash around an area that really should be operated by more than one person. There's a clear driver's area in this ship, and a clear area for someone to be, doing the equivalent of shoveling coal.
Yeah. Steve, any observations that you want to pitch in with here before I trundle along?
I think in a similar vein, I got the sense that this is a thing that more than one person is meant to be doing, given how frantically your character is moving around the ship.
Yeah.
Or the craft that they're in. It doesn't seem like it's designed for one person to jump around this way. It seems like there should be multiple people helping.
Mm-hmm.
That's no longer possible. Did you get a sense that you're the only entity in this space other than a seagull?
It certainly feels that way.
Yep.
Not only in terms of me being alone and bereft of allies or companions or friends, but it also doesn't feel like there's anything in this world that is pursuing me or that is hostile to me. It feels, barren isn't the right word, but it feels lonely.
Yep.
It's not that it's devoid of life. It's not that it's devoid of energy, but I certainly feel quite alone.
Yeah, because it's not like the seagull didn't look unhealthy.
No.
There was evidence of life.
Yep.
It just seemed more sparse.
And to bring it back to the music as well, it does feel hopeful. It does feel joyful and pleasurable. It doesn't feel ominous. It doesn't feel like I'm setting out on a desperate journey. It feels like I am journeying with purpose. All right, so I get another batch of crates that I've moved over. I rather recklessly immediately hop out of the vehicle to go and grab one of them. It was traveling a little faster than I expected. I had to scurry quite a lot to catch up. But again, because that power button comes unpopped, it does eventually trundle to a halt. If we're thinking about this again, I guess through the lens of this was built by people in the world to travel a long way in, perhaps it's not by accident that there's a fail-safe on this vehicle to allow it to stop so that you don't get stranded out in the middle of who knows where.
For sure. As well, because I mean, yeah, inclines and declines are going to be a thing,
Yeah,
presumably.
yes, that's a good point. There's a very sort of soft incline that I start traveling upwards, and I start to get the sense that that this vehicle requires a little bit of torque and a little bit of grunt to get moving. So if I come to rest on an incline, I do tend to travel quite slowly.
Mm.
And I also was starting to get a sense of if the steam pressure is building up, then I'm actually starting to move slower and slower. And then when I release the steam from the steam valve, when it starts glowing red, I get a little bit of a kick of energy.
There's some little engine that could thematics there.
Yeah. So I end up coming to a stop on a sort of like a wooden jetty incline because I see a red barrel next to some white crates which I haven't seen before. And it turns out that putting this barrel in the engine fills the energy meter up completely. So I've now got in my brain 1 barrel equals 2 wooden crates. So I'm starting to get a sense of fuel metrics and trying to plan accordingly. I've also reached the point now where I've grabbed enough things that I'm trying to figure out where to put them so they're not in the way.
Mm.
I had thought about just leaving them lying around, but with it being locked to a 2D plane, they do get in the way. You're constantly having to push past them or around them. And I figure all those hooks are hanging from the ceiling for a reason, so I start finding places to hang things. So going down the hill, even though I'm not putting any extra juice into things, I start going considerably faster due to all that potential energy that I've banked. Just pause for the effect of the pun there.
Oh, I get it.
No takers, sure.
No, very good, very good.
And by this point, it feels like I'm, quote unquote, a long way out to see if there was, in fact, any ocean here, which is why I was quite surprised when I come across a very large, very obvious and very dark concrete wall. Feels like a giant concrete wall.
Mm.
I wasn't sure if it was a wall. I wasn't sure if it was the side of a ship. A wall felt more appropriate. And I start to see giant cargo containers. And then I come across a crane that I pull my vehicle up underneath, and in the background I can see the silhouette of another giant crane. And that's actually my 10 minutes, which may seem a little strange because I went left to right and I pushed a few buttons and I trundled along in a vehicle carrying a red letterbox until I put it in the engine for more fuel.
I think the weirder thing is how, reviewing the footage, how quickly this flew by.
Right.
I was genuinely taken by surprise when I saw the URL appear at the end of the video.
What is that URL, Aaron?
That's www.first10minutes.com, using digits, not letters, folks.
Nice. Very good.
Yeah, the I don't know, maybe it was, I think a large part of it is probably the sort of the rhythm of process. The following the assembly pipeline, which I guess is probably my entry point to say I really appreciate the visual design of this ship. The fact that, like, the trick to the design problem of how do we communicate the assembly pipeline is literally just having the assembly pipeline map be what you interact with. You put fuel in on the left, the fuel travels over to the right, you go over to the right, you release steam, you use speed. The sort of the process that you're rolling through, the consistency of it and the regularity of it once you have an understanding of how it works. I mean, that's how we get through shitty retail jobs. You disappear into the assembly line, you disappear into the process.
Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot.
Yeah, exactly. And I think on top of that, like, because this is meaningful, this is purposeful, is what stops it from being, quote unquote dead end. This feels like there is meaning behind it, and so therefore you're more, I don't know, as a viewer, I felt more willing to just disappear into the process of the work. It felt like it was the right thing to be doing.
And I think there's also an intrinsic curiosity setting out on a journey in finding where that journey takes you and finding out where that journey is going to conclude and how and why it's going to conclude. And there's a disparity between me playing the game and the character in the game. It feels like they know a lot more about where they're going and why than I do. And all of my takeaways from this comes from the tone in which the game is presenting this embarkation to me. So.
Oh yeah, totally. And I mean, like, but see, that's the thing, right? Is like the character might seem like they know more about the journey than you do, but you know enough based on the way that they present themselves and the simplicity of the interaction inside of the ship and the fact that we have all grokked Mario. We know that you need to go from left to right in these situations. That's kind of like, at least within this 10 minutes, that's all you really need to do. That's all you really need to do for them. And so based on the way in which they move and they operate, I got a sense that it doesn't matter if I'm not following along right now. What matters is that I trust that you know what you're doing, and that as my avatar, I'm doing the right thing and helping you move forward.
Right. There's a couple of times where I end up outside of the vehicle as it's moving. As it's moving, the game seems to be structured to invite me to hop out of the vehicle while it's still underway, so that I can learn a couple of things. So that I can learn that it will stop itself and I won't be left behind.
Yeah.
And so that I get a sense of a reminder rather of how small I am in this environment when I'm not in the vehicle. So there's a couple of things that it's cementing really quite beautifully here at the beginning, is that this vehicle feels like a place of safety for me. It feels like the comfortable and correct place for me to be. And despite all of the buttons and engines and odometers and all of the other things, there's also a little bunk bed up in the top front sort of corner of the vehicle. It feels like something that I'm meant to be in for a long time.
Which, I mean,
and then I'm setting out as a journey. It was like, this is a home for me as I travel.
And I guess that kind of like that filters back to the fact that the design of the house was a similar shape.
Yeah.
And color.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why do you think the game is making such an effort to use color in this way? And how is it using this color to build this sense of homeliness and to build this sense of place and belonging?
I think from what I saw in the footage, that mirroring that we've already mentioned in form is echoed in color, of browns and reds being warm colors and homely colors and safe colors in this world. And the rest of the environment having kind of shades of grey, or smoky or foggy or sandy or whatever it happens to be. But they feel ghostly, I think, from looking at the screenshots of it. And your character, I recall, pops against that background quite a lot. They don't feel like they sit naturally in the seabed. They feel like they sit naturally in their house and in the vessel or the vehicle.
As with the red letterbox that I sacrificed.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It was because sort of mourning and loss and grief were all sort of key words that were jumping around in my head as I was watching this. And with the colors sort of kind of assisted me in following along that trajectory, because I sort of came to see this not necessarily as a representation of how things actually are, but a representation of how this avatar is processing what's around them. Where it's like the sort of the grey world is indicating that this is being seen via sort of like a set of mournful eyes, but the inside represents home and represents safety in the form of process, in the form of routine, and in the form of continuing the good work, right? Like
and focusing on efficiency and optimization rather than letting yourself give into whatever it is that
exactly,
and that assisting with being able to build your own sense of rhythm and control and routine.
Because there are so many like lonely, sad artifacts out in this landscape that you could stop and focus on for so long, to the point that you're arrested in movement forever. But you don't really, you can take stock every now and then to look outside, like for instance with the wall or the ship, the large imposing area. You can take stock in it for a second, but at the end of the day, it's not going to move. It's not going to change. The only thing that's in movement, that's moving forward, is you.
So this busyness, this perpetual attention, and always having something that requires doing as a way of me not only having some immediate focus and purpose to my time, is also allowing me to overlook or not focus on the state of the landscape, but I also get an immediate sense that I am making progress because the vehicle is very literally making progress. And that's why when the vehicle does come to rest, either because I've gotten my timing on things wrong and it's run out of juice, or whether it's because there's things that I want to go and pick up, so I stop the vehicle, everything goes quiet, everything goes still, and it feels mournful, and it feels cold, and isolated and alone,
Mm.
which is why it's so much more rewarding then to be able to get back to the vehicle, to be able to fill the tank up, to be able to push the go button and be underway again.
And to get the music back.
Yes, and to get the music back.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I did want to ask the two of you about is, and we've sort of been touching on it a few times here, the abstraction of control in this vehicle, abstraction of systems, abstraction of mechanics and inputs is a very video gamey thing.
Mm.
But in this particular case, that abstraction is built into the actual world and into the vehicle that I'm in this world, rather than it being buttons in a UI or menus or screens that I open and tinker around with.
Mm.
I guess the part that I'm most interested in is how do you, this is clearly a very conscious choice, how or in what ways do you think that contributes to what this game is trying to evoke?
I mean, you gotta put in the work.
Yep.
Right? Like to move forward, to make change, to progress, to go somewhere, you have to put in the work, and you have to keep putting in the work. You have to make it a practice. You have to make it a habit. And I think just having a UI overlay where you press the run the ship button
Right.
wouldn't sell that experience.
That would be purely me doing the work, not me doing the work via the character doing the work.
Exactly, right?
Yep.
Like there would be that further abstraction of we'll take care of this part for you. Like the meaningfulness of this game comes from you doing the work, like genuinely like pushing each button and actually having that so close to pure kinesthetic experience of depressing the button, having the outcome occur from that, and then continuing the assembly line.
Mm-hmm. So let's run with the start of the game being a gravesite or a memorial to another person. I don't think it's too far a stretch to then go, this vehicle seems to be keeping me awfully busy. It feels like this would be easy with two people. But if we flip that around, it feels like maybe somebody designed this vehicle to keep one person busy if they knew they weren't going to be there with you.
Sorry, I'm thinking about that now. That was an unexpected reading. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there does, in terms of, I mean, in base, like, so the person that your avatar is supposedly mourning, if we are continuing down that assumption, they have a face in that there's a portrait provided of them.
Yep.
And that face, just based on the blanks that we fill in when we see abstracted lines that come together to form something that we recognize as facial, told me that this was someone of a significantly higher age than the character that I am.
Yep.
So, I mean, like, a parental relationship is the easy thing to jump to there, but I don't think this game necessarily specifically, explicitly communicates that.
Right.
But at the very least, yeah, it does seem like there's potential that this ship was being made, not necessarily for the, the transportation of both of you to somewhere else, but the transportation definitely for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if the other person happens to be along for the ride for a portion of the ride, then gravy. But otherwise, this can be operated by one.
The vehicle perhaps hasn't just been built to get me there in a physical sense, but also to get me there in an emotional sense.
Yeah, like this is the physical and emotional traversal to a new phase of existence.
This game is set in an empty seabed. It's large, it's fairly flat, it's fairly barren. It's got a very different feeling because it's a seabed where the ocean isn't there anymore.
That's a weird thing, right? Is it's sort of like a flip on most of the environmentally bent post-apocalyptic-y scenarios that we see, is that usually it's what is currently happening to our planet, which is sea levels rising and us dealing with more water, not no water at all.
Yep. And if we lean into another apocalypse trope, this doesn't feel like there's been a bunch of nukes raining from the sky.
No, yeah, like the idea that there is no vegetation or anything because some weapon was utilized. Like structures seem somewhat intact. Like you go over a lot of, like, say, piers and bridges and things.
Yeah.
But it looks like they've only been destroyed because vehicles have passed through them.
And there's also a sense that because you do tend to see piers and so forth quite a long way out to sea if the sea was still there. So there's almost this sense that people kept building further and further out as the water kept moving further and further away to try and, I don't know, pretend or at least make use of the ocean while it was still there.
That's it.
So if we run with
odd,
this,
yeah.
if we run with this drained ocean setting, in my mind, and this is a very terrestrial way of thinking, I am a land-based creature.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that we're heading to the other shore of whatever this ocean was.
Presumably,
Yep.
one would hope.
I have no evidence to back that up, but that's my assumption based on what's happening and based on this setting. Were there any other topics that people wanted to touch on?
Did you get a sense in this time, Tony, of if there was ever going to be a failure state or punishment for not doing well?
That's an excellent question. So I'm going to draw parallels with Inside again. You hit some fail states pretty early in that game.
Yes.
Like don't let the people in the white masks catch you.
Yep.
Don't get caught by the vicious dogs.
Yeah.
And you get slapped on
Don't
the wrist
drown,
and you get told do it
et
again.
cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't get a sense that there's anything here that is going to put me in immediate peril, but I do get a sense that I'm going to have to go through some trials to remove barriers, to make sure that I don't run out of fuel, to progress through who knows what that's going to be waiting for me out on the ocean, as it were.
Sure.
But there doesn't seem to be any you are dead, please try again.
Yep. Did you get a sense that there's a way to steer this vessel?
In the hypothetical third dimension, Steve.
Yeah. Well, in the very real third dimension, the game has parallax scrolling. You can see that if there was the ability to turn on this vessel, there would be ample reality to turn into.
I have two ways of answering your question, and I'm going to do both of them.
Okay.
The vehicle itself, from what I can infer from looking at the side of it in cutaway, it looks like it is constructed to travel in a straight line.
Yep.
It has two very enormous wheels at the front, and it has some little sort of wheels at the back to keep it trundling along, but everything about it implies that it goes straight, and that's it. If we want to talk about this in a thematic sense, it feels like there is a destination in mind and it's that way, so that's the way we go.
Okay.
Yeah. No matter what is in the way, I could go around it or I could do a series of elaborate puzzles to open the gate that I need, because this vehicle can't turn.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not going backwards. The other interesting thing of note in the vessel itself is in the top right, the picture that's pinned to the wall of an ocean and of a vessel on the ocean. So that was the other thing that I sort of found myself wondering as I was looking at the ship, was like, is this something that could function on water eventually at some point? Is this where we're actually heading? Like, could it be that the ocean is still, receding and that we're essentially heading to catch up?
If that were the case, then the designer of this vehicle is going to regret putting a giant entrance at the front and the back at the bottom.
It's probably going to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, like, if that's I'm wondering about, sort of like sealing that up, if that's a possible thing, or
Right.
yeah.
It does kind of look like a giant steamboat, though.
Yeah, right. Like, and that's I feel like with the sail at the top, you've actually got something that
Well, where the sail will go at the top, it's not quite there yet, but it does get there pretty soon after. I think the 10 minutes ended just before that happens. Another thing that's worth noting with the energy meter as well is that it is a bright blue fluid and it does slosh around. So if you want to get a sense of the ocean in a small circular area that indicates how much juice you have, that's also a thing as well.
Speaking of that energy,
I
noticed it's kind of the only out of place color.
Yes.
It's the only blue that I saw in your 10-minute video.
Yep.
Even when there was water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really evocative in terms of how rare this energy must be, or how precious it must be, because it's the only way that blue exists in this world. The sky is grey. There is no blue but this.
Yep.
If I can duck back, one of the things that I was thinking about when we were talking about what is the purpose of this vessel in relation to this no steering, is rather than, I think as you described it, Tony, of it's already set up to go the direction it needs to, and now it just needs to get there. I was reading that more as we don't need to steer because there's nothing we need to steer at.
Like any direction is fine.
Yeah, doesn't matter. Pick a direction and just go.
Yeah.
Because we don't know where we're going or what is there. We just know we need to try and get as far away from where we are as possible.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yep. No, you go.
The other thing that came to mind while you were talking about, I think, Aaron, you raised that the 10 minutes felt very quick. You were surprised that 10 minutes had gone. Is... Tony, do you think it's just making a flow state, like putting you in this rhythm, this cycle of oscillating between different resources that you're managing, and like reverting your attention around the place?
That is certainly a significant part of it, but it's not all of it.
Sure.
The musical tone and reinforcement, I think, is helping me in much the same way that a sea shanty and Sea of Thieves can help pass the time. It's going to name drop that game forever. But I think part of it also is that towards the end of this 10 minutes, I felt familiar enough with this rhythm that in the doing of the rhythm, I was starting to think about the meaning of the journey.
Okay.
While I was actually continuing to do the things that would allow the journey to continue. So I guess much in the same way that you have all of your good ideas in the shower because you're in the middle of a routine that you've done before that is relaxing and that is rhythmic and that has a discrete sort of structure to it. And your mind can get busy thinking about other things, solving problems or things that have been in your subconscious for a while come floating to the surface. So in the earliest stages of this, once I got onto the vehicle and was trying to figure out what the fuck I was doing, I then transitioned to the point where I was like, well, I understand how all these bits work. I'm still working on my timing, but now I'm wondering, where am I going? Why am I going there? And what is going to be waiting for me along the way? Yep. And that passes the time pretty quickly too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Shall we do a 10-minute check?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Hey, me. Yes, me. Does this game tell you what it's about? I think we've spent a considerable amount of time in discussing this to convey the number of things and the number of feelings and emotions, the intentionality here that this game builds. It's clearly about a journey. It's clearly about you setting out on this journey alone, and maybe that wasn't the intention at the outset.
Yeah.
And it is also about having to do the work to make sure that the journey continues. I think I might have just quoted every Pokemon episode, but that's okay. So
the journey will be tough, but the journey will also have its rewards. Stick around for the journey.
I have my friends
with the power of friendship
and thunder
and enslaving living creatures.
And animal cruelty will be fine.
And does this game tell me how to
your
play
rice
it?
ball, Brock.
Oh, that Misty. She's always cranky.
Does this game tell me how to play it? Yeah, it gives me, I think, 4 button prompts. Tells me to use the left analog stick, tells me to press B, tells me to press A, and tells me I can use the triggers. And then from there, it's just a matter of moving around the actual world itself to fiddle with gadgets and buttons and contraptions to make the vehicle go. And my success or my efficiency and effectiveness at doing that grows noticeably over the course of this 10 minutes. And that's all I have to say about that. So I think it might be time for the plugs.
Welcome to the plugs. So if you'd like to get in contact with us and let us know what you think, or if you enjoyed this or you got some feedback for us, or questions for us, the email address is contact@thefirst10minutes.com. You can also find The First 10 Minutes on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Libsyn, and others. But those are probably the main ones that are going to make sense to reach out on, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yep.
Keep an eye out for more Twitter polls so you can let us know which of those suggested games you'd like us to play. And if you want to get in contact with us individually, Tony.
Yes. If you'd like to get in touch with me personally, you can contact me on Twitter where I am at Callanskald. That's Kalinskald. And I also do another podcast called Downloadable Context, where I talk to video game developers about what makes them tick. And you can find that at downloadablecontext.com. Hey, Aaron.
Yeah.
How do people get in touch with you?
So Twitter is a place where I appear occasionally. My handle is @rundownflamingo. If you want to find out what I think about things and also what games I'm working on at the moment, that's the place to find it.
Hey, Steve.
Yep.
Second verse, same as the first.
Cool. Twitter would be _Steve Halliwell, or you can just find me at stevehalliwell.com and there'll be links there to all the stuff.
That's a show.
So that's
It's
a show. Thank you all very much for listening, dear listeners, and we will catch you again next time.
Hooray.
Goodbye.
Bye bye now.